46 years.
3 beloved isles.
1 beloved station, Radio Cayman.
The voice.
The heart.
The soul of the Cayman Islands.
Oh, I think they're doing a great job. A lot of them are.
Good afternoon, Dwayne. How are you?
Not too bad, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today with Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
But I do have some questions.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today. If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining us. And as we start things off with the good friends over at the Department of Labour and Pensions, we're going to get a chance to focus on pensions until 1 o'clock. So stay tuned for Talk Today.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. MedLab in Smith Road Plaza, your complete medical laboratory solution. Call 949-7331. And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village, convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255. Courtesy of Flow,
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thanks for joining us on what promises to be another terrific Tuesday. And we invite you to be part of the discussion as we have a chance to talk to our wonderful colleagues across the Department of Labour and Pensions, and focusing on pensions, the Deputy Director for Pensions, Ms. Emolinson. Good to see you again, Mom. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And she's brought her colleague, the Senior Pensions Officer, Ms. Amrita James. Welcome. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you.
I think back to when the initial discussions were back about pensions and the notion, and then where we've come all these years since, increasingly, and then 2020 comes around and some people have been able to access their pensions earlier, utilize it in effective ways. But the world continues, hopefully, and we'll get more of us. But pensions, would it be a good place to start with? What is a pension? You share with us as best as you wish.
Sure. If you think about a pension, it's simply your income replacement when you get to retirement. So when you're normally working,
Is that, okay. Make sure your mic is,
sorry.
I wish you got a red mic and a blue mic and a yellow mic. Or just get a mic behind it.
Well, if it's not working, just let me know. I can repeat, no problem.
Right.
Well, I was just saying that, oh, okay, it's not close enough. Okay, sorry. I was just saying that, of course, when you're working, you get your salary comes from your employer, your wages come from your employer. Mm-hmm. But when you're retired, you need a source of income. And that's basically what your pension is. It's your income replacement in retirement.
Or your children. See, I thought that's what it was.
Well, sometimes they help too, but, that's the gist of what a pension is. It's to be there and give you a source of income when you're retired. So that's what it's for.
And there are, for one of a better way, there's a pension for the public service. I mean,
yes.
There's different aspects of that for the parliamentarians, the judiciary, but
yes, right.
Just generally speaking,
right.
And then there's a private sector pension.
Correct.
Would it be helpful for us as a public to say, okay, the Department of Labour and Pensions, do you look after all the pensions or only the private sector one?
No. Our responsibility is specifically in relation to the private sector pension plans. So government's pension plans, the parliamentarians, the members of the civil service, the LA, all of those pensions are looked after by the Public Service Pensions Board. Completely different legislation and not within our remit.
And then, so if you're a sole employee or if you're part of a multinational that has a presence here, or,
right. Or if you're a small business,
if you're a small business, whatever operates in the private sector,
right?
The pensions legislation affects you, applies to you, and
Correct.
supervision and regulation falls to the Department of Labor and Pensions.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, see that? I was paying attention. That
Yes.
Must have been a Friday.
I must give you an A. All right.
A for effort, huh? Well, thank you for that. I'll take my A. See that?
No problem.
Can I get a gold star too?
Of course.
There you go. All right. So we have that, and we noticed, well, there's a lot, and I think this is very timely. A lot of people are saying about, last year and the year before, governments were doing things to try to help businesses with their cash flow, and individuals and the like, and it's term of pension holiday, and I thought, where's my pension going? I wanted to go up, but that was where we didn't have to make contributions if we opted not to.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
So it's a pension. We call it a pension holiday, but correctly, it's a suspension of contributions.
Okay.
So neither the employer nor the employee had to make any contributions during this period of time.
Okay.
But as you know, that expires at the end of June, which is only 6 weeks away.
All right.
So we thought that was a good time to come on the radio and talk to you and everyone who's listening about employer and employee responsibilities under the Pensions Act.
All right. So as of the end of June, people know as an employer and employee have to restart where they were before, or has it changed? So tell us
the legislation hasn't changed. It's still the same legislation. So the requirements under the legislation are also still the same, right?
Okay.
So in talking about it today, let us start with you very kindly, actually. Took a little bit of my thunder. But that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
I was just trying to set up that law
No,
for you,
that's
man.
fine. That's so fine.
I was playing tennis.
No problem at all. As I said, I gave you an A, so I mean, absolutely no problem at all. I appreciate the
Just
help.
overachievers, right?
I appreciate the help. Right. So when we look at the National Pensions Act, that's applicable to Caymanians and permanent residents as well as expatriate workers, but there are some caveats along there. And as we already talked about, it does not cover the civil service. So that's completely different legislation. So every employer has a requirement for a pension plan. Amaritha, why don't you talk about the employer's requirements for the pension plan?
And for those who listen, certainly want you to be a part of the discussion. So let's listen, you will be informed. So Ms. Amaritha.
Okay, the requirements for a pension plan for an employee. Every employer in the island who has a business is required to have a pension plan for their employees. Whether that's 2 employees, 35 employees, they must have a pension plan. They can be a member of a multi-employer pension plan or can have their own pension plan. Now, if they're going to have their own pension plan, that has to be approved through our office. The multi-employer pension plan, there's 7 of them on island, and they can apply to any of these 7, and the requirements then would be given to them through the multi-employer pension plan. Now, the onus is on the employer to establish this plan, because remember, it's his business, his or her business. They're the ones that are having permits out for their employees, so they are ultimately responsible for their employees. And in choosing a pension plan, they need to have a meeting with their employees so that everybody can agree, and they can hear reasons why we don't want this one or why would we rather go with this one, so that at the end of the day, it's not where the employees feel that they have been forced into applying or being a member of a particular pension plan, and that was not what they intended or what their desire was. So it all must be done in agreement. If the employer has their own pension plan for the business, then the onus is upon them to ensure that the renewal of the registration is filed and completed on a yearly basis or annually. Okay, so this paperwork should then be submitted to our department, the Department of Labor and Pensions, for review.
The employers that have their own pension plans, there are a few of them. Most of them tend to be financial institutions, but the bulk of employers on island participate in the multi-employer pension plans.
So just for your knowledge, the list of multi-employer pension plans and all this information can be found on our website also. We'll give that information at the end. We have the BAF Cayman Guaranteed Pension Plan, which is in Dorsey Drive, Dotcom Center. We have the Colonial British Caymanian Pension Plan, which is on Eastern Avenue. And we have Cayman National Pension Plan, which is located in Cayman Bay. Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan, which is on the waterfront, Strathvale House, second floor.
Actually, they just moved.
Oh, they just moved?
That's right, yes, because they're one of the pension plans that recently changed some of their service providers. So they're actually on Eastern Avenue now. So actually, Chamber Pension Plan and Silver Thatch Pension Plan are in the same building, just one's upstairs, one's downstairs.
Okay, so that would be just across from
Uncle Bill's. Yeah.
The Saxon.
Right.
Yeah.
On Eastern Avenue there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we have Fidelity Pension Plan, which is the pension part has now moved down to by the roundabout there when you're coming off of
By Galleria and under like there.
Right near Foster's at Camana Bay, that kind of area.
Across from Lacovia and under like.
Yeah. Yep. They're down there.
Island Heritage Pension Plan, which I do believe they're on after you come off the Harkwell bypass.
Yeah.
Right before we get to the old cinema.
Right.
Correct. Right. Same area.
And of course, the Silver Thatch, which was mentioned before, is with the Chamber of Commerce on Eastern Avenue in the Saxon building. Now, let's talk a little bit about eligibility or pensionable. Eligibility meaning when an individual or when an employee becomes pensionable, when contributions are then required by law for that individual. Now, employers are required to participate once they're between the ages of 18 and 65, whether they're full-time or part-time. Okay. Previously, the ages were between 18 and 60, but in 2017 of January, that the pension entitlement age had been increased to 65.
Okay. Can we just ask, not to interject too much, but prior to this amendment, there was some discussion as to whether there was a retirement age or an age at which pension contributions were no longer mandatory. That was 60, and it's now been moved to 65. Is it still that is a mandatory age for pension contributions, or has that now introduced a retirement age? As some have.
Well, it's not a retirement age because under the legislation in the past, it was actually referred to as the normal retirement age. And persons construed that as, that's when the employee has to leave the company and you can't work for me anymore. But we've actually changed the terminology now. So we use normal age of pension entitlement to indicate it's only the age when the employer and the employee no longer have to make contributions. Right. That's all it means.
So it's not a retirement age. It's just at that age of 65 now, you're not required to mandatory contribute to the pension as you were prior.
Correct.
So it's not a retirement age.
No, it's not a retirement age.
I think I understood that, but thank you for clarifying that for us.
No, good question, though.
I get another A?
That's right.
What? It's on a Tuesday? Oh, I know if I can just get some chocolate. All right. You know what? If you'd allow me, Miss Amarita, to stay on the good side of Susan, because it hasn't started too good, as you can see. Let's take this break without interrupting you. When you come back, you can probably pick up where you were.
No problem.
And I'll try to behave. Try is the operative word. Stay tuned. We'll talk today.
After more than 20 years, the Cayman Islands Air Show is back. Start your Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend on Friday, June 3rd by watching a thrilling air display on Public Beach, 7 Mile. Witness amazing acrobatic maneuvers as world-class pilots put on a stunning show. Then see the planes and meet the aviators at the Cayman Airways hangar. Parking permitted at designated sites with free shuttle buses to the events. For all the details and event lineup, visit CaymanAirShow.com. The Cayman Islands Air Show returns June 3rd.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean and comfortable environment, no long lines and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointment.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Ask our professional team about the benefits of cutting-edge technology with MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
Due to infrastructure upgrades, customers on Woodland Drive and Walbridge Drive off Shamrock Road in Lower Valley will experience interruptions to their electrical service on Wednesday, May 25th between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. For more information on the outage, please contact CUC's customer service team at 949-5200 or email service@cuc.ky.
The Spring Labor Force Survey is currently being conducted by the Economics and Statistics Office. The Labor Force Survey collects data on employed and unemployed persons. Trained interviewers with ESO ID cards will visit randomly selected households in all districts. The interviewers will exercise appropriate COVID-19 protocols using personal protective equipment. The interviews are confidential in accordance with the statistics law. No individual data will be published or disclosed. Survey data are exempt from freedom of information. For more details, please call the ESO on 516-3329.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, and thank you for sharing with us. And thanks for this continued partnership to reach across, all of our public service and have the wonderful team here from the Department of Labor and Pensions as we focus on pensions. The Deputy Director, Ms. Amy Wollaston, and her colleague, the Senior Pensions Officer, Ms. Amarita James. Thank you for letting us just take that break. Then you were sharing, about some of the responsibilities and the like. If you would, please continue.
Thank you. I was, before we took the break, I was talking about the employees that are required to participate, and I did say that legal requirement would be between the ages 18 and 65, whether you're full-time or part-time. The other thing is that now that the law has been changed and has increased the age of pensionable entitlement, anyone that would like to participate in a RSA or get a retirement savings agreement or even an annuity, then they can now do that at age 55, which would be 10 years prior to the pensionable age of pensionable entitlement, which is 65. Those persons that have been between the ages of 48 and 60 in January of 2017, when this was enacted, they would be what we call grandfathered in under the 2012 revision, and they then would be able to do an early age of pensionable entitlement at age 50, which means that their age of pensionable entitlement would then be 60. If you need more explanation on that, you can call us, and we will give you all the contact information later, and that we can go in more depth with you.
So this is the legislation was amended in January 2017, right? And
that's when it came into effect, right. Actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I just want to repeat, if there were no amendments to the legislation, ordinary entitlement for retirement would have been at age 60, and they could have started at age 50.
50 would be early retirement then.
For that person.
Right.
With the amendment in 2017, as it came into force, if you were between 48 and 60, then you still fall under that.
The 2012 revision.
Yeah, the old revision. But if you were 47 and a half, or you were close to 48,
then
but not,
you would fall under the 2016 revision.
Moving your early retirement and retirement age 5 years.
5 years further.
Okay.
Right.
I think that's pretty clear.
One of the easy ways to remember it is if you were born 1969 or earlier, then you can still take early retirement at 50 or normal retirement at 60. If you were born after 1969, so 1970 or later, then you can't take early retirement until 55 and normal retirement is 65.
Good way to remember it.
Yeah.
See that 1969
Yes.
Chevy Camaro SS?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Yes.
I understand that there was a question in regards.
We did. Thank you very much for reminding us. So off here, we fielded a question that was asking about if there is no legal requirement retirement age, then in the public service, it seems government would be retiring people at 65. Why is that?
Well, the thing is that, first of all, as we said at the beginning of the program, this legislation is applicable. Sorry,
It's particularly applicable.
I couldn't get that out.
It's particularly applicable. That's what
I couldn't get that out. Anyway, it's applicable. There we go.
There we go.
To the private sector. So we can't really comment about the civil service, but of course that would be a question to ask the portfolio of the civil service as to how it operates in the civil service. That would not be appropriate for us to comment on. That's not within our remit.
Right. So the Department of Labor Pensions, as we shared, and thank you for reminding us, focuses on the private sector pensions.
Yes.
The public service falls under the Public Service Pensions Board.
Correct.
Questions are not before the civil service.
Right.
Okay.
And can I just add, for those in the private sector, it all has to do with the organization in which you're attached to, their policies and the contract in which you signed with them, which if they want to set your retirement age at 70, then they can if you agree to that. However, in accordance with the National Pensions Amendment Act and its amendment, your pensionable age of entitlement would stop at 65.
Okay. So would that mean then that anybody, just for argument's sake, who has agreed contractually, to say, I want to work until I want to work, so beyond 65, those contributions, if they continue to make, what's the term? Additional voluntary contributions is what you use.
Yes.
So and there's a specific reason for that they can be able to access them separate and distinct.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yes.
Maybe we'll get into that.
So any contributions paid over and above what the law requires are considered voluntary contributions. And then there's a whole section of the legislation that governs when those are accessible or not. We didn't have that on the list to talk about today, but if we have time, we can certainly get into it.
If not, then we'll come back at some point when it's convenient. Because
of course,
continued education, I think.
Of course.
All right.
Okay. Just continuing with the employee or employer eligibility and pensionable information. Now, Caymanians and permanent residents, you are pensionable or eligible for contributions immediately, regardless of probationary periods, when you started, as long as you are a Caymanian and a permanent resident. If you started working on the 4th of May, then your pensions should be contributed within your next
pay period. Right?
Pay period.
Okay.
Now, those that are not would not be considered pensionable would be Caymanians that are under the age of 23 and in full-time education. They're no longer pensionable. Prior to the amendment, they were. Now they're not. But you have to actually prove that all three of these. So you have to be Caymanian, number one. You have to be under the age of 23, and you have to be in full-time education. So it can't be one, and then you fulfill two. It has to be all three. It has to be fulfilled at that time.
Right, and it's important if an employer has an employee or an individual, let's say, because they're not an employee under that, who falls within those three criteria, then it's important that the employer, maintain some sort of records to ensure they considered the person and they looked at these three factors and realized they weren't required to pay, and they have evidence on file in case there's ever a question as to you didn't pay for someone you should have paid for. Right. They have paperwork to back up the fact why they did not.
Okay. Full-time education.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then when you think about, in addition to the people who, we talked about the people who are required to contribute, there are people who are not required to contribute. So for example, if you are not Caymanian, and if you have not worked on the island for 9 months, you're not required to participate in a pension plan as yet. Yes. So if you're a work permit holder and you first come to the island, for the first 9 months of your employment, you're not required to participate in a pension plan. But that's the first 9 months of your employment on island, not for any specific company. So let's say you move employers, right? 6 months after you start, you move to someone else, and maybe a couple months later, you move to someone else. It's when you've reached 9 months of employment locally, then you become pensionable. And your employer has to start, whichever employer that might be. Yeah.
So if
in addition to that, persons who, again, are not Caymanian and not permanent resident, but are also working in private homes as a maid or a gardener, those persons are not required to pay pension contributions either. Neither them or the employer are required to pay pension contributions.
So working in the homes as a maid, gardener, or the like.
Right. You're not required to.
And
right?
maid can be, just to break it down in familiar
Yeah,
words,
yeah.
would
Some
be a
people,
domestic
helper.
worker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Without it being exhaustive, but let's say somebody, and I can't think of anything, so this would be a good example, hired someone specifically as their chauffeur or their butler or their some other thing specific, like you may see in other jurisdictions.
Yes.
They're not the maid or the domestic, they're not the gardener.
Right.
There's their personal something in the home.
Right.
Pensionable?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on what I just explained to you.
That is my understanding as well.
Okay.
Even nannies, caregivers.
Yep. Those are all pensionable.
Even though
as
they're
well.
in the home,
Yes.
they're not actually considered domestic or a
Right.
maid.
Right.
Because they have a specific specific duty.
Right.
They have to have different requirements in order to become a nanny or a
And I
caregiver.
appreciate you clarifying that, because we may use the term, the domestic help and the nanny, and think it's interchangeable, but under the legislation, it isn't.
No.
So if you were hired as a caregiver, as a nanny, that is pensionable. And that's very distinct from someone who has been, say, well, this is the maid or the domestic help. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So early on, Amrita explained that the employer works with the employees, and you figure out a pension plan you're going to participate in, right? So then you have to deal with, and we've identified all the people who are now eligible, right? That's the next stage we did. So now we have to get all those eligible people actually enrolled, right? So they can actually make the contributions.
Yep.
So once you've decided on the plan, then the employer gets the paperwork from the pension plan administrator, or the pension plan administrator provides it to the employer, 6 1/2 dozen of the other. And then the employer fills out his part, the employees fill out their part, everybody signs as they should, and then they submit it to the pension plan administrator. Okay. And then you are now enrolled.
Right. You referenced that there are 7, and thanks
Yes.
for the list, multi-employer pension plans.
Correct.
And then there are some that are the employee private plans, their own plans.
Yes.
You don't need to list, but do we know the number of those employer-owned plans?
Oh, sure. There are only about 4 of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the reason why I'm asking, and in that case, the selection of the pension plan that the employees and employers will contribute, who makes that decision? Is that the employer? Is that the employee? How does that happen?
So the employer is responsible for providing, but the actual selection of the plan is done by the employees in conjunction with the employer. So, and for example, what happens, particularly when you find like some of the financial institutions, they will actually say, no, we don't want to have a multi-employer plan. That's their right. But we obviously have to have a plan because the law requires it. We want to create something that we think is more advantageous to our staff. And so they decide, okay, we want to select our own plan. And then they will create incentives for their employees that they can't perhaps possibly offer in the multi-employer plan. So it actually becomes more advantageous to the employees for the employer to have their own. But obviously, those type of benefits are only possible by an employer who has the financial infrastructure to do that, or financial means to do that. Every employer does not have those financial means, which is why the bulk of employers participate in the multi-employer plan, which is common in other jurisdictions, but particularly in Cayman, because you have a lot of small businesses who don't necessarily have the HR units and the necessary infrastructure internally to deal with all of this type of HR responsibilities. So they have a pension plan already established, already registered. The administrator fulfills the responsibilities with our office already. So it's kind of an easier fit for a small business to deal with the multi-employer plan than to have their own.
To collect the funds, send it across.
Right, exactly.
So with the 7 multi-employer, and the employer comes and says, we like choice 1, and then the employees presumably will look at it and say, well, let's have a look at the 2 choices or 3 choices, and then they decide. And
because if you think about it, it's the employee's money that's going in.
Right.
The employer's responsibility is really in terms of making the payments. So you provide the plan as the employer, you make the payment, you make the deductions, I should say, from the employee's salary, but you also make the payment to the administrator, and then the employer's responsibility is done, basically.
Right.
But the employees are the ones then who have to say, okay, well, my funds are paid in, and I have questions about how is this happening and what's going on and all of that. So actually, some of the presentation we're talking about today, we'll get into some of the employees' responsibilities and some of the things they really should be doing as well.
Okay. And as Ms. Susan reminds us at the break, for the employer who has his own plan, can the employee say, well, no, we like that, but we believe the benefits are better with one of the other 7?
Absolutely.
And so we don't.
They can, absolutely. They can go to the employer and say, we have concerns, of course.
And they can change from one to another as they wish.
If they want to, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
It's a conversation, though, for sure.
I really welcome this opportunity, and as much as we want to continue right now, let us just quickly pause and take this break. When we come back, we'll continue.
No problem.
You see how hard it's raining?
Yeah, and I don't have time to fight traffic and get my lunch from Subway. I have so much work to do.
Why don't you order Subway by using the Let's Eat or Bento app? Save time, stay dry, and get your sandwich fast.
I never thought of that. Great idea. I'm going to order now.
Order me a veggie pizza while you're at it.
And a cookie platter for the office.
Too busy at work or home? Is the rainy weather stopping you from dining out? Order your favorite Subway sandwich, wrap, or pizza through the Let's Eat or Bento app with fast and reliable delivery. Subway, eat fresh.
After more than 20 years, the Cayman Islands Air Show is back. Start your Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend on Friday, June 3rd by watching a thrilling air display on Public Beach, 7 Mile. Witness amazing acrobatic maneuvers as world-class pilots put on a stunning show. Then see the planes and meet the aviators at the Cayman Airways hangar. Parking permitted at designated sites with free shuttle buses to the events. For all the details and event lineup, visit CaymanAirShow.com. The Cayman Islands Air Show returns June 3rd.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean and comfortable environment, no long lines and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointment.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Ask our professional team about the benefits of cutting-edge technology with MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
Workforce Opportunities and Residency Cayman are reminding customers that applications must be completed in full or they will not be accepted. In efforts to improve customer service and processing time, only fully completed applications will be accepted. Customers are responsible for providing the required information for the application to be processed and are encouraged to review the application checklist before submission. For guidance, visit www.worc.ky.
The DJ's 5K takes off this Sunday, May 29th at 6:30 a.m. at the Government Administration Building. Reminder, registration closes Friday at 6 p.m. $25 for adults, $10 for children 17 and under. Funds raised will support the Cayman Islands Cancer Society, the Alzheimer's and Dementia Association of the Cayman Islands, and the MS Foundation. You can register at racecaribbean.net. Participants can collect your race packets at the Government Administration Building on Thursday or Friday, 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. COVID-19 protocols will be observed on race day. Participants are asked to do an LFT test before leaving home.
Did you know that ValueMed Pharmacy has a free online prescription service? Managing your health and medical requirements has never been easier with ValueMed. Simply visit value-medpharmacy.com. That's VALU-medpharmacy.com and click the Refill Prescriptions tab on our website. Fill in the information for new prescriptions or refills and choose your preferred pickup location. ValueMed on Walkers Road or Boddentown. Then bring in your original prescription from your doctor when picking up. There's no need to stand in line and wait for your prescription. Save time and pick up prescriptions at your convenience by visiting value-medpharmacy.com. That's VALU-medpharmacy.com.
Talk today. But I do have some questions.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, and thanks for the opportunity to partner with the Department of Labour and Pensions. And today, to focus on pensions, the Deputy Director, Ms. Amy Wollaston, and the Senior Pensions Officer, Ms. Amrita James. Thank you for making the presentation in such a way that it's, as they say, in a very simple, straightforward terms that we can understand. And I really appreciate the repetition. So thanks again for that.
No problem. I think about it in steps, and I try to create it in such a way that, and talk about it in such a way that it's steps, so people can understand, okay, I have to do this first, then this, and then this is the next step, and so on. Wow. So now we've talked about, you enrolled. Everybody's enrolled now. You fill out all the paperwork, whatever, right? Okay, so now the employer then, at this point, has to start making the deductions from the employees, right? So the employer can deduct up to 5% of an employee's earnings, wages, salary, gratuity, commission, that kind of stuff, from the employee's salary. And then that the amount of it's called earnings technically, is $87,000. So you deduct 5% from the employee's earnings up to the employee's earnings of $87,000. So if you're fortunate enough to make more than $87,000, then your employer doesn't have to deduct on the earnings over that. But up to 87, then they would. Yes? Okay.
Used to be 60,000 before,
correct,
right?
Exactly. And it was changed to 87 in 2017. Okay, so now you've gotten your deduction taken out of your salary. Then the employer has to also pay 5% as well, right? So the employee got 5% taken out. The employer has to pay 5% as well. This is a good time for me to make this point. So the employer can actually pay more than 5% if they want to, right? But they cannot pay any less, right? And on the other hand, the employee can be, if it offsets. So the total you want to make is 10%, right? So if the employer says, okay, I want to be a generous employer, and I know the law says 5, but I'm going to pay 6, well, then the employees don't have to pay any more than 4, because then they make up the difference between the 6 and the 10, right? So that's how you get to 10.
Right. If the employee says this, okay, you know what? Normally I would pay 5, so that extra 1% would be that AVC?
Correct. Exactly. Okay. Right. So the employer might say, okay, I'm going to pay 6. The employees only have to pay 4. And some employees might say, okay, I'll keep that. I'll pay an extra 1. And then, as you said, that 1% would actually consider additional voluntary contributions at that point.
And there's something important to that.
Yes.
Can I just clarify for some people that may not understand? When the law says 5% is deducted from the employee's salary and the employer has to pay their 5% as well, it doesn't mean that the employer is going to take 5% of his salary. What it means is that, for example, if you made as an employee $100, then only 5% of that 100 would be taken out, which would be $5. So your employer now has to match that, okay, which is an additional $5 in order to give you that 10%, which should be placed then into the employee's membership account at a pension plan. So that's just to clarify that a little bit.
So the employer matches your contribution up to 5%.
Right. Okay. Exactly. So then you have, as part of as I said, they've made the deduction. So now the employer has to fill out what the administrators calls a contribution form, which is basically paperwork. Amy Wollaston. Now, you put the employee's name, so Amy Wollaston, I'm using myself. When you did the enrollment form for the employee, the administrative should have come back and said, okay, this is Amy Wollaston's membership number. So you're going to put that number on the form. That way you ensure that the $10 or whatever you're paying for Amy Wollaston goes to Amy Wollaston's account. Make sure that number is there. So you have her number, you have the person's name, then you have to classify. The employer is doing all this now. You have to classify, is this a mandatory or a voluntary contribution? So you fill all of this out on the paperwork, right? And then the employer submits that form along with the payment to the pension plan administrator. And that's how the contributions are paid. Now, what's critically important is the deadline when the contributions are due. So they're due the 15th of the month following their deduction. So in simple terms, that means I'll use July, since the pensions holiday is going to expire in June. So deductions would then start again on the 1st of July, right? So the employer would deduct from the employee's earnings. So then the contribution would be done would be due on the 15th of the following month, which for July, that would then be August. So on the 15th of August, all of the employers should then be submitting their paperwork to the administrator. These are the July contributions, because you've got everybody enrolled, you've got all the enrollment numbers, you filled out the contribution sheet, you paid the amount, now you're sending in the payment. Yeah? So now the contributions are now paid. That's where the employer's responsibility ends. Unfortunately, if they don't pay on time, they will have interest. That's why it's important to pay on time. Yes? Because that's required by legislation as well.
Hey, you should pay your fees on time, you get that bill.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So that's the end of the employer's responsibility to the pension plan per se. But the employer has other responsibilities. For example, under the labor law, the employer is supposed to give all of their employees a pay slip, which shows this is your salary, this is what I took out, etc. So that should go. The employer should provide that to the employee. The employee receiving it should review it and say, okay, yep, this looks like the same amount of money I got in my account, and what did he take out for? And you should see your pension deductions there, your health insurance deductions as well, those type of things. So that's information that's critical for the employee to have, so they know what money was taken out of their salary, and also, obviously, it'll have their salary or their wage and how many hours and things like that. Also important, the employer needs to keep records. So this is now a stipulation under the National Pensions Act that the employer is required to keep records of the employment of all of the pensionable employees, all the deductions taken from their salary, all the contributions paid over to the administrator, the dates upon which those contributions were taken, all of that kind of information. And that is now a requirement in legislation from 2017, and the information is required to be kept for 5 years. So that's important because as you had another group from our department on, we have an inspection group. So they go to employers to say, okay, we want to see all your records. These are the records that are supposed to be there when they go looking to say, okay, now we can see, did you enroll all your eligible employees? Did you pay all your contributions? Did you do everything you were supposed to do? Because all that information is now there for the inspection unit to look at as well. And then the employer has a record of what they've done. Other critical things the employer should be conscious of is keeping the pension plan administrator informed of their information, the employer information. So if you change your P.O. box or your contact person, or you sell your company, or, for example, you have employees join the company, you also have employees leaving the company. So just like you enrolled someone into the pension plan, you also need to inform the administrator this person has now left. So thus, the administrator then isn't looking for contributions for that person anymore. And if you don't do so, then the administrator has no way of knowing, okay, what happened to this particular individual?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Again, keeping people informed helps you out.
Exactly. So now for the member or the employee, one of the critical pieces of information for them is actually statements. The statement doesn't come from the employer. So we talked about the pay slip coming from the employer, but now statements, I'm referring to the pension plan administrator. So the pension plan administrators are all required to at least provide every member with a statement once a year. Now you find a number of the pension plans will do it far more often. I think Silver Thatch will do it quarterly. Chamber of Commerce does it twice a year. Some plans do it once a year. Some plans do it 4 times a year. But at the moment, the legislation only says once a year. And it's important that when you get the statement as a member, that you review that information. And now you also have your pay slips from your employer, and you cross-reference, just like you reconcile your bank account. You cross-reference and make sure, okay, my employer took out $10. Is there $10 on my pension statement to show it went in? That's how you check to see if your employer is doing what he's supposed to be doing as well, right? So that information is critical. You could also then look at, okay, how is my plan doing? What information has the administrator? Because sometimes they print stuff on the back of the statement. They put in additional flyers. This is how you stay informed as a member of what's going on with your pension plan, right? And I think one of the things that people have begin to realize as a result of the emergency withdrawal from last 2 years ago was how much they didn't know. And it's important because that's how you keep informed about what's going on. You read your pension statements. But in addition to that, one of the most important ways for a member to be informed is an annual general meeting. So it is not stipulated in legislation at the moment, but fingers crossed it will be forthcoming, because there was a legislative amendment that's not yet in effect, and we're looking at bringing that into effect soon, I hope. But what's important there is that most of the multi-employer plans have an annual general meeting. And it is an opportunity for the member to speak to all the professionals, all the service providers, the trustees, and ask whatever questions they have. You know, how are things going? What's the performance? How are we invested? All of those types of, how much does administration cost? All those type of critical questions that you as a member need to know. So you go to the meeting, and usually it's announced in the paper. You should get something in writing as well. This is an opportunity for you as a member to learn about your pension plan as well. And then you ask questions and you express any concerns that you may have. You know, some people are a bit intimidated, I understand, because you don't necessarily understand all the technical stuff. But, you know, you just start out with the process and you do your best and you ask your questions. And whatever you don't understand, they should be able to explain it to you.
All right. Well, I'm hoping that, you know, even though this was very informative, it was very brief, we can have continued discussions and look not just at the repetition of the employer aspect, but the employee. And maybe it's good to take it in little nuggets. So we'll have a continued discussion in the weeks ahead.
Sure, no problem at all. As I said, the pension holiday expires in 6 weeks. So we're happy to come back and do some more education. We can actually talk about the exact same subject again for those who weren't able to listen to it.
Repetition, this is, you know.
Yes. They have a way of communication called DRIP. So you give people a little bit at a time. So
thanks.
You know,
Ms.
helps
Jean?
with the education.
Can I just leave our contact information?
Yes. Good point to end on.
We are located on the second floor, Midtown Plaza, and that's number 273 Elgin Avenue. We're just above the Butterfield Bank on the second floor there. If you know where Paperman's and Domino's, then we're on the second floor there. Our website that you can access is www.dlp.gov.ky, and you can find this information there as well, our laws and both labor and pensions laws and the amendments. You can also, if you wish to send an email to us, you can through our confidential email address, which is dlp@gov.ky, and that will be, you will get a response back sometimes within a couple minutes after you send it. It could be a day, but we try and get our responses out in a timely manner. Or you can just leave a message on our confidential hotline, which is 345-945-3073. So we hope that today has been beneficial to the public. And if you have any questions at all, do give us a call. You can also call through to our regular phone line, which is 945-8960. And you can be helped that way as well.
Right. Thank you both, and looking forward to coming back. We'll certainly make it happen as soon as it's convenient for you. And thanks very much.
Thank you, Thank you very much for the opportunity.
It's a pleasure. All right, we're going to pause and take a break. When we return, we'll talk about a little bit different, but I want you to be tuned in as well. We'll be discussing climate change risk assessment. So please stay tuned for Talk Today.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice. Local, regional, international. This is headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. The Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure informs that it is aware of the incident which occurred this morning at the Department of Vehicle and Driver's Licensing Breakers location, in which a customer was injured while in the process of getting a motor vehicle inspected. The customer has been taken for medical assistance, and the incident is under investigation. In international news, leaders of the world's largest Baptist denomination met on Tuesday to discuss and process an investigative report that uncovered decades of abuse and cover-ups. The Southern Baptist Convention, the U.S.-based Association for the Church, had covered up the abuse and vilified survivors, it said. With 13 million members, SBC is the largest Protestant body in the U.S. The investigation carried out by the SBC by an outside firm was launched in the wake of a 2019 report by the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News that exposed hundreds of alleged cases of sex abuse within the church. Amber Heard's team will not call Johnny Depp to the stand, a source close to Ms. Heard said, a strategic U-turn in the last days of the high-profile trial. Mr. Depp sued his ex-wife for $50 million for a column she wrote in which she claimed to be a victim of domestic abuse. Ms. Heard has countersued. British supermodel Kate Moss, a former girlfriend of Mr. Depp, is among witnesses expected to take the stand in the remaining days of the defamation trial. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Sollins.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
After more than 20 years, the Cayman Islands Air Show is back. Start your Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend on Friday, June 3rd by watching a thrilling air display on Public Beach, 7 Mile. Witness amazing acrobatic maneuvers as world-class pilots put on a stunning show. Then see the planes and meet the aviators at the Cayman Airways hangar. Parking permitted at designated sites with free shuttle buses to the events. For all the details and event lineup, visit CaymanAirShow.com. The Cayman Islands Air Show returns June 3rd.
Busy, busy, busy. Feel like there's not just enough hours in the day. Savannah Pharmacy, service to make your life easier. Now you can WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. And pickup is just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays. WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. Savannah Pharmacy, wholesome values with modern conveniences.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab. Blood test, x-ray and mammogram, all of that is MedLab. Affordable fees and friendly service, a full professional team. MedLab is always comfortable, MedLab is always clean. For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Call 949-7331 and ask about MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
Are you a Caymanian status holder, or a resident of the Cayman Islands who is interested in enhancing transparency, accountability, ethical standards, and promoting awareness in public bodies? If you are civic-minded with the highest level of integrity, the Commission Secretariat, on behalf of His Excellency the Governor, welcomes your expression of interest for appointment to various statutory commissions. For more information on the commissions and candidate qualifications, visit the Commission Secretariat website at www.commissionsecretariat.gov.ky.
I am Roshana Hydes, your Miss World Cayman Islands. The Miss World Cayman Islands 3rd Annual EnviroWalk 5K is on Sunday, June 26, 6:30 a.m. at Safe Haven. Join us and encourage others to help achieve a more sustainable future. I'm racing against His Excellency the Governor. I'm planning to win, but maybe I'll be nice and let him finish first. Register now on ticketsplus.ky. For corporate discounts and more information on EnviroWalk, contact missworldcayman@gmail.com.
Subway is serving up a special new sauce, bursting with flavor in every bite. The new Savory Collection is a tropical sweet and spicy sauce made with a combination of spices, habanero peppers, thyme, onion, black pepper, ginger, citrus juices, and molasses.
So good.
Wow.
Sensational. Delicious.
Subway's Savory Collection pairs perfectly with our oven roasted chicken or steak sub. Savor the flavor. For a limited time, only at Subway. Subway. Eat fresh.
Since 1993, Rotary Central has worked diligently each year to provide quality bus shelters to our community. A traveling convenience to our school children, the elderly, young people going to work, guest workers, and visitors using the public bus. We, Rotary Central, help you, our advertisers, make it happen. Your marketing dollar travels a far way. Positioning your message, your product, your services, your presence in over 83 bus shelters. Every dollar you spend, every advert you place helps to build another bus shelter, providing modest comfort for Cayman travelers. Reserve space now on the only billboard medium in the Cayman Islands. Email rotaryshelters@gmail.com. rotaryshelters@gmail.com. The Bus Shelters, a partner in community convenience. Another inspiration program by Rotary Central Cayman Islands.
Talk today. but I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And always grateful for an opportunity, as I say publicly, to not just admire, celebrate, showcase, but to say thanks to the continuous sacrifice and service within our civil service. And today, as we talk about climate risk, climate change, and the risk assessment, we have the Chief Officer for our Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resilience. Make sure I have to get that. So, Ms. Jennifer Ahern, it's a pleasure. Welcome.
Thank you. Very happy to be here this afternoon. Looking forward to talking to the public about the upcoming workshops and public meeting on climate change risk assessment.
I've seen the press releases, and I think it's going to be well attended, and that indomitable spirit of the director at the Department of Environment, Ms. Jeannie Banks. Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sterling. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is, for me, always a learning opportunity, and I think for many of us in Cayman, we don't appreciate not just the resources that we have within our shores, but the access with which and ease that we can reach across and invite people and get the knowledge, get the exchange, interaction, and to be assisted in many of our endeavors. And if I can be allowed to say a special thanks to Ms. Hannah Reid for facilitating today's discussion. As she said, an information out, she was not only timely, instructive, and informative, but it positioned us to be better prepared through not just the material she sent, but here's other stuff that you can get that's credible, trusted, and you can come away. And with that, I think Dr. John Pinniger, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our studio and to our shores again, and to say that you are indeed an excellent company, not just in terms of intellect, but enthusiasm. If it's okay, Ms. Jen, perhaps speak as scientific advisor when we think of things in relation to policy initiatives and challenges that many times just elected governments in democracies face. They need things to be able to show that they continue. You plant a tree, to the best of my knowledge, even the fastest growing tree, it's going to take a while. It's going to take some time for it to take root, for it to bear fruit, for it to give shade. It's not going to happen in one election cycle or even sometimes in one generation. I think about the oak.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been doing is a climate change risk assessment, and that's the idea really, is to look at all of the things that climate change might affect in the Cayman Islands and put them all on one piece of paper and order them and try and find out, well, which are the big ones? Which ones do we need to worry about? And then we can think about, well, what do we need to do to build resilience to stop those things happening or to put in place things in case they do happen? And so yeah, it's great to be here and really looking forward to the next couple of days.
So Ms. Jen, from that perspective, CFAS, as I'm reminded, what a Center for Environmental, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, this partnership. But we look at the Cayman context and we see, and I say this not to be disparaging, but I found it at first to be unfortunate that in our public sort of official, one established daily publications, one said, well, we're so small. How can we even consider the little impact that we have to be significant? For many of us, we thought, well, that's unfortunate because everything an individual does has a corresponding impact on something else. So from that perspective, when we look at the risk assessment and we look at all the things we've been doing to date, maybe this initial partnership and project, give us a perspective. How did it come about?
So, I mean, just to pick up on the point that you raised about individuals' impacts, and the fact is, the Cayman Islands, in terms of our contribution to the problem of climate change, our contribution is probably negligible on a global scale. Right. But the fact of the matter is that we are on the front line of some of the impacts. And just because our contribution to the problem globally is negligible, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing what we can to be part of the solution and also to prepare for the impacts. And so one of the things that will come out of this exercise is to help prioritize where our greatest risks are. And John can talk a bit about the process that we're going to do in terms of the long list that we've got now. But we really need to all understand that we individually and collectively have to act. We really, really do. And we have to act not only to reduce our impacts in terms of climate change and global warming, but also we have to act to prepare so that we can help mitigate or adapt to the impacts that are inevitable at this point in time. So this exercise now with the climate change risk assessment is something that we're doing with financial support through the Governor's Office, which we're incredibly grateful for, and in partnership with CFAS and the CHECK. I can't remember. It's ecology and
hydrology. Yeah. Center for Ecology and Hydrology.
Out of the UK as well. And many people may remember that back in the mid 2008, 9, 10, and 11, I think, there was quite a prolonged public engagement process that led to a draft climate change policy in 2011. Now, that policy's never been formally adopted. Several of the recommendations from that policy have actually been implemented, which is fantastic, but a lot of them haven't been. But one of the things that this exercise is going to do is to help us have an informed position for updating that policy. So obviously between 2011 and 2022, the world has changed. A lot of new knowledge is out there in terms of what is happening with climate change and the impacts that we can expect and how, the opportunities that we have from technology or through science to address that. So this initial climate change risk assessment will feed into the overall review and update of our climate change policy. So we're really just embarking on this journey. And you talked about, the time it takes to grow the tree and how that doesn't always coincide with an election cycle. And one of the things that, this government and the Premier as our minister is really keen to make sure we do is make sure that we are looking at things through the lens of sustainability, that we are recognizing that we need to make some decisions now for the benefit not just of our current generation, but future generations as well. And that's the lens and the time horizon that we're dealing with. So that's a bit of sort of background of where we're at.
Very helpful. And I mean, as she shared out, as Gina was thinking, that it's not unlike the parent, from the Cayman context, okay, we may be small or impact minuscule, almost, negligible as you shared. But it's like the parent saying to the child, it's not a case of do as I do, and do as I say. You have to be a very willing participant and lead by example. So with that in mind, the Department of Environment, you and your team have been champions all along. I say this carefully, but sometimes it bear the brunt of a lot of us. What do you mean I have to consider that? And you say, well, if you want this, you have to do this. This is something they should take into account. Give us a perspective from the Department of Environment's role in all this.
Right. So I think that I would just go back to something that Jennifer has said, which is to do with the sort of emissions from the Cayman Islands, from the perspective of our sort of contribution to global emissions. Yes, that is very small. But when you break our emissions down per capita, we actually are very high, which means that individually we have huge responsibility, but also a lot of opportunity to reduce our emissions. So I think that is actually a key message that people need to hear, because I hear the part about, we hardly contribute anything to climate change. Well, that's true when you look at us in aggregate, but if you look at us individually, as individuals per capita, our emissions are very, very high. And most of those are driven by energy and transportation. We've been collecting emissions data, for over 10 years now, and feeding that into the whole UK emissions data sort of inventory. So, and the Department of Environment, in terms of our role, as also the Chief Officer mentioned, we led the last effort to come up with a climate change policy. And when we were asked by the current Premier, how can we address this sort of languishing policy document and give it some life, we came up with one of the possible solutions being to approach it from a climate change risk assessment perspective, and that would help us, we felt, to sort of prioritize, to recognize and prioritize the really important actions that we need to take in terms of adaptation, possibly also for mitigating our emissions. And so I reached out to John and his team at CFAS, and we're here today. The ministry took up the call, and everybody worked together to pull this off. So,
but as you were sharing that, and I'll ask Dr. John in a second, but perhaps from the Cayman perspective, and what is instructive to me is sometimes to not just get anecdotal, information, but to speak to the older heads. And they would say to you, well, man, it's a lot harder today than when I was a child, or it's a lot, hazy, the water quality isn't as clear, Some would say they would go off the quay in Barcus and they could see all the way to East End. Now they would exaggerate a bit, but you could see the changes, right? From that perspective, then, you talked about the emissions data and the like. How much of that is in the public domain? You collect it, we send reports to places, and it's all there, but for the general public, in the media online, do we have access to that? Do you share?
Yeah, it's on our website. We have a climate change section on our website. So the emissions data are there. We also provided that to the National Energy Policy Committee when they were looking at, options for basically reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and converting more to renewable energy sources to meet our demand. And all people, I think, are aware that we have a national energy policy and that it was tabled in 2017. It runs to 2037. We're in the process actually now of looking at a review of that.
Right.
So,
if I may ask, from the perspective that probably up until very recently, the idea of climate change or global warming, for some, was just something that others talked about in academia. CFAS is probably only a name that some of us are now hearing for the first time, but only recently. With great respect, can you tell us a bit more about your organization, the role in this?
Yeah, so CFAS, it's one of this sort of anonymous acronyms, but we're a government agency. We're part of the Department of Environment and Rural Affairs in the UK. Actually, we've existed for 120 years. We were set up originally to help monitor fish stocks around the British Isles, and then over the sort of 20th century, our remit has broadened to anything to do with the sea and fresh waters as well. So we do monitoring of pollution, we do climate change, but we still do a lot of fisheries and aquaculture work. And in this case, we've teamed up with CEH, the Centre for Environment, Ecology and Hydrology, and they're a sort of an independent research organisation that specialise in the more terrestrial and freshwater environment. So together we're covering marine and terrestrial here. But yes, so we've been involved in quite a lot of these risk assessment type exercises. So the UK, in the UK, we have a climate change law or act that says every 5 years we have to do a risk assessment for the entire UK, and we're now on our third cycle. And for the first one of those, I covered all the marine and the wet stuff, and then the last one I was in the environment section. And we're pretty much following that pattern from the first UK risk assessment here, where we've gathered lots and lots of information together and tried to pull out the risks, and then we score them. And the one with this methodology, the main things you're trying to do is compare apples and oranges a bit. But you have to, even the things that we know very little about, you've got to have them on that scoring, because these are known unknown things could be some of the most sort of dangerous threats. So they have to be in that risk assessment, even if we know very little about them. And so that's what we're partly in the business of doing over the next few days, really.
And I think when we look at statistical analysis or any kind of surveys or research, we want to understand the process, the methodology, how much credibility we can give it, how is that data not only gathered but extrapolated, interpreted. Can you share with us that process?
Yes. So what we've been doing over the last sort of six months really is we've tried to gather as much information as we can. We're covering sort of species, habitats, industries, different land use types in the Caymans. We're covering all three islands. And we've produced an evidence report where we've tried to sort of go sector by sector, talking about what we know about climate change. And if there's nothing specific to the islands, then we've tended to draw from global studies or regional studies. And from that, we've pulled out a sort of long list of risks. And also a few opportunities, but not many opportunities. And then over the next 2 days, we're going to be scoring those for each of the three islands in terms of proximity or urgency.
Mhm.
So is it already happening? Is it going to happen in 20 years? Is it going to happen in 30 years or 100 years? And magnitude.
Mhm.
And in terms of magnitude, we look at, how many people might be affected, what extent, what geographical area might be affected, or how important sort of globally are the ecosystem component that could be affected. And we sort of put those, so the proximity and the magnitude things together, and you get an overall score for risk.
Mhm.
And that's how we then rank all the way across from everything from seabirds through to sewage.
Mhm.
We're going to be trying to rank all of those, the climate change effects on all of those. And we've got, I think, 53 risks that we're starting with, although that might be refined a little bit over the next 2 days.
Yeah, 53, 52, yeah. So we'll take a break, and maybe we can expound on that some more so that we appreciate, this is as much as evidence-driven as possible. How much what is extrapolation and analysis? What is the potential impact for us as a small island developing nation, as it were, and an island nation in particular? We're given a lot of information, but maybe as you were sharing about looking at what is specific to Cayman, what research reports, data that you've drawn from the surrounding region in absence of something being available here?
Yeah, so there was already quite a lot of material available from when the policy was put in place 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And then some of those basic things about, how the temperature's warmed or how the sea level has risen, some of that stuff we do have available for the Cayman Islands. And similarly for things like coral reefs, there are regular monitoring of stations all around the Cayman Islands. But then for other habitats or industries, there's hardly anything. So, we don't know a lot about the deep sea, although there's a new project just about to start. Some of the terrestrial habitats are very poorly understood. But generally, for a lot of the risks, we had some information about the Cayman Islands, and specifically, we often had information that came after, for example, Hurricane Ivan,
Mhm.
and the effect of hurricanes, because that tends to give some impression of how sensitive or how vulnerable particular sort of habitats or industries are. But whether or not you can really take a lesson from a single event, that's one thing that we have to be a bit careful of.
Mhm.
But there's surprisingly lot of information specifically available for the Cayman Islands. And if not that, then we can draw more broadly from the vicinity, if you like.
Okay. All right. Well, when we return, I certainly appreciate it, because this isn't just an academic exercise, for some college students as they do their thesis. This is something that may be very impactful in a very short term. All right. Stay tuned for Talk Today, and please join us after the break.
The best foundation you can wear is glowing, healthy skin. The offices of dermatologist Dr. Wayne Porter specialize in enhancing your skin's well-being. Whether you're seeking advanced skincare, including any skin cancers, Botox, filler, cosmetic skin enhancements, or simply looking to reduce wrinkles, Dr. Porter offers a full-service dermatology and dermatological surgery practice. For more information, email drportercayman@gmail.com or call 946-9020. That is 946-9020.
Cayman Islands Center for Business Development is taking applications for the new Grow Your Business program. The program involves 12 free weekly 3-hour training sessions, as well as 1 year of free business coaching, and aims at identifying, training, and coaching micro and small business entrepreneurs on how to effectively navigate the growth stage of business. Interested businesses should submit completed applications by email to cicbd@gov.ky or in person at Suite 101 Baytown Plaza, 68 West Bay Road. For more information, call 244-8009 or email cicbd@gov.ky. The application deadline for the Grow Your Business program is June 1st.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, and thanks very much for joining us. And as we talk to climate change risk assessment, there is perhaps there are some public meetings, and we'll tell you more about it. But as we get a chance to learn firsthand, it's always an instructive time. And I think I'm glad that Miss Norma doesn't charge me for tuition for sitting there. As I feel like I'm in classes at times. I got a instruction on pensions early, and now I get to look at climate change and so on. So our chief officer in the Ministry for Sustainability and Climate Resiliency, Ms. Jennifer Ahern, the director of the Department of Environment, Ms. Jeannie Banks-Petrie, and then from CFAS, Dr. John Pinniger joins us. As we were going into the break, and I'll ask some of those things, maybe I can just rewind 1 second. There was hydrology mapping recently in Cayman. We saw a visit, some press release.
Yeah, that was the Department of Lands and Survey, I think, that was working with, I can't remember the agency out of the UK, and they were looking at doing some mapping, and I think the output from that is meant to help inform some of the work that HMCI is doing as well.
Yeah, so that was the two-flow modelling and so forth that was recently done by JNCC. Yeah.
How does that tie into any of this to an extent in terms of the data collected and the information sharing?
Yeah. Well, what it can do is help us to understand a bit better how some of our natural systems will respond, for example, to flooding events, wave overtopping events, whether that flooding is rainfall driven or from the sea coming over, as we experienced during Ivan. So it gives us a better indication of where we might need to think about adaptation a bit more carefully. Whether we know we need to move buildings away from the coast in certain areas, whether we have to have, increased coastal setbacks to accommodate rising sea levels and all of the impacts that will bring for us. I think modeling is always an interesting exercise because you need to have reliable, robust information to put into the models in order for the output to be worthwhile.
Right.
So I think always keeping an eye on some of the deficiencies of the data that you've used to sort of make your model in the first place is always a good step. But I think equally they're powerful because the outputs are visual. And so you can people can understand, I think, more intuitively when you show them, these are the areas that will be impacted most, or these are potentially the areas to be most affected when we have, heavy torrential downpours of rain, or we have a storm surge of a certain height coming as a result of a hurricane or a tropical storm. So I very much support the modeling approach because I think it does add a dimension to our ability to communicate with the public that is important, that we're able to say, here basically is an output that we can look at to see what some of the effects might be in certain situations under certain scenarios.
And I think this is where the more of us participate in the public discussions, the more we either A, get informed, and B, find a way that we can impact something or is impacted by it. Dr. John, from that perspective, you talked about time and magnitude in the area, and as we look at the idea of the climate risk assessment, from that perspective, you read some publications and you got 20 years, you got 10 years. Talk to us about timing.
Yeah, I mean, some of the risks are already kind of happening now. I mean, you're seeing things like influxes of seaweed on the coast. We're seeing coral bleaching. Obviously, hurricanes. The projections for hurricanes are not necessarily that they're going to happen more frequently, but the hurricanes you get are going to be on average worse, more intense, and so we have to think about that. But you can learn from hurricane events, and so it's trying to work out what is the signal of climate change that we're seeing now. The things, because it's difficult if you see changes in the weather now to pin that down to climate change. But then thinking longer term, some threats might take a long while to materialise. So one of them is something like ocean acidification, which is quite a slow process. But together with temperature can lead to coral bleaching. And so these things can interact as well. Also, for the Cayman Islands, if you look at the rainfall projections, actually for most of this current century, it's not going to change very much for a long time. But then towards the end of the century, it's going to get drier. And so some things are going to happen very soon, and some over a much longer time scale. And it's trying to pull those apart. And the way that the risk assessment works is that's why we have, we try and bracket, is it going to happen now, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? And that goes into the scoring, because things that are happening now get a higher scoring in the risk assessment, because it means we have to react now.
Much more urgent and timely. So from that idea of timing, people like to quantify things, inventory in a particular environment. Well, we've got so much left, so we've got to reorder. If we were putting a timing on things, and it's always important to fix the urgent, don't ignore the obvious. Are we saying, you got 5 years, you got 50 years before this becomes critical, or have we passed that point in some areas?
Some things we're going to have to react to now. I mean, some of the sea level rise things. The sea level is rising quite quickly. I mean, it's a few millimeters each year, but over a 20, 30 year period, that's quite a lot. And when the islands are as low as they are, if you then have storms on top of that, you need to be prepared for that. And so things like that, we need to be putting in place things now. Others, maybe we need to think about taking away other pressures. So some of the more biological risks, if you can remove other pressures, so whether it's, habitat loss or things, I mean, I mostly work on fisheries, for example. If you can remove overfishing, then the stocks are more robust and are able to respond better. And that's true with most sort of biological risks. And so there are things we can do now that will help build robustness and resilience in the future.
And I think, it's really important to understand that the timeline between sort of the cause and the effect is not immediate. And even if we sort of shut down every smokestack in the world today and brought our carbon emissions today down to zero, we are still going to have to deal with the impacts from the historic emissions for many, many years to come. Things like sea level rise, even if we were to take immediate action right now to stop the trajectory that we're on, we would still be seeing sea level rise coming, because some of that is already, like Gina says, it's already baked in, it's already happening, and we can't turn back the clock on that.
Is it irreversible, some of this?
Yes, some of it is.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that is one of the issues that's so hard to communicate, because there are risks that are so wide and varied. Sometimes what we're seeing is variability right now. Sort of a huge amount of the rainfall is one example of that. We may not be seeing the full drying effect that's predicted, but what we are seeing is a lot of rainfall variability, and people are already beginning to experience that in, for example, just look at mangoes when they come into to when the trees blossom and when the mangoes ripen, and people are like, what is going on? I mean, I don't understand this pattern. And so all of these things are happening. We're also seeing, incidents, for example, during periods of very high tides, where we're beginning to see groundwater, which is tidally influenced, right, coming up through drainage wells in very low-lying areas.
Sunny-day flooding.
Yeah, so that's already beginning to happen here. And water sort of coming up the street in certain areas. I'm not going to name them, but we've seen them, seen this happen.
I mean, one additional interesting thing that we've been trying to think about is, are there things that might get better, potential opportunities? I mean, as I said, there aren't many, but there are a few. So if you look at some of the things like mosquitoes, if it does become drier, it might become less habitable for some of the mosquitoes, for example. And similarly, some of the seafood poisoning, ciguatera type things, are projected probably to get better. But there's not many opportunities, if you like, from climate change. It's nearly all threats.
I guess when we do a SWOT analysis, then we need to look at at that. You reference flooding, and something that should come to our minds immediately, not only because of our nation or we're low lying, but we've seen it. I was shown a map circulating in that social media space now that presumably indicated Cayman is flooding. What can you say that? Is that a legit map? I was going to get it to share with you.
I don't know which map you're talking about. So I'm not going to pronounce and its legitimacy without
but tell us about, do those things exist, and to what extent, just generally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly hazard management and its precursor, I can't remember what they were called.
The National Hurricane Committee?
I don't know. So it might just have been Lands and Survey. They did some projections about, for example, if a storm of this magnitude with wind speeds of this, this many miles per hour coming from this direction, what might be some of the flooding scenarios. So there were definitely maps developed as a result of that.
But going back to what John was saying earlier about the difficulty of making predictions based on one event.
Exactly.
I remember after Hurricane Ivan, there was a map that was done that showed the flooding during Hurricane Ivan. But if the storm had approached us from even a slightly different angle, that flooding map would have looked completely
different. And that's the issue when people are being asked to assimilate a lot of information and data, and they're not perhaps used to dealing with uncertainty, as many of us, and science is partly about uncertainty and how to manage that. So I think that can sometimes be difficult because people want an answer.
They want to know.
And is this property going to flood to this level? And sometimes you can't answer that. You just don't have the information. And so it doesn't mean that the information you do have is bad. It just means that you have to recognize the constraints of the data and the information that you have, not make it suggest or say more than it really ought to be, but use it intelligently to inform your decisions going forward. And that's what we're going to be trying to do in the next week or a couple of days.
Indeed, and you will succeed.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some of those maps included in the evidence report that we've put together. And they are useful for sort of setting the envelope, if you like, of how, in 50 years, it could be this much. And if often as climate scientists, we talk about scenarios. And there are different trajectories that the future might go in, depending on if the world does get its act together and reduce emissions, then we perhaps won't see some of those worst scenarios. But we have to prepare just in case the world doesn't get its act together.
Yeah. So as we talk about the maps and the flooding, I gather there are two things. There's the potential impact of a flooding following a passage of a hurricane or the like. But then from the global sort of rise in temperatures and the environmental impact of people and our activities on flooding in areas, is there such a projection separate and distinct from a weather event that say, well, this could happen? And to that extent, have there been threats to other low-lying places where now they're seeing coastlines erode, areas come underwater?
Yeah, I mean, so I did a little bit of work for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change on small islands. And there's quite a lot of very low-lying small islands around the world. So the Maldives are the most famous, but there's also some in the Pacific. And they're already at sea level. And it's not going to be easy to keep them above the water, even in the next 10, 15 years. Here, you're a little bit higher, but you need to prepare, I think, because I think sea level's rising. It's about 1.6 millimetres a year here, and about 2 millimetres on other parts of the island. And so, yeah, that sounds very small, but that's actually quite fast.
That's
yeah. I mean, there's examples. There's barrier islands in the Carolinas, I think, where they've had to relocate entire communities, and we're seeing more examples of communities having to physically pick up stakes and move because where they're currently located is no longer, it's either being so severely impacted by sea level rise or climate change events that they can't stay. There's examples in the far north with communities on permafrost, where the permafrost is thawing and entire communities are basically on the verge of being sunk into the ground, and they have to relocate. So,
and even close to home, a few years ago there was all those hurricanes that hit Antigua and Barbuda, and Barbuda is also very flat, and during the hurricane it almost had to be completely evacuated. People are coming back now, and so we can learn from other places. And again from storm events, but it's the storms on top of the sea level rise and the other pressures that we have to think about.
And I think it goes back, if I understood your question initially, it was about, I think, possibly the actions that we are taking that may exacerbate the impacts of climate change, and can we do anything about that? Have we looked at that? To the extent that we understand how to protect, for example, the coastal systems that protect us, so our coral reefs, our seagrass beds, mangroves. We've been sort of banging that drum for a long time, as you know, the need to take care of the systems that provide services to us in the form of coastal protection, because reefs do, mangroves do, seagrasses do, and I think that the fact that we have put our protected areas in place, we had them in place early on in the 80s, I think that stood us in good stead. But it's not going to fix climate change, or it's not going to even really mitigate the impacts of climate change. Our reefs are still bleaching, but if they're healthier, they have a better chance of recovering from that bleaching event and lasting a bit longer.
I mean, that goes back to this idea of removing the other pressures, so that the natural system can sort of be more robust.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's about enhancing the resilience.
And then there are those things like, not building where we shouldn't be building, and respecting our coastal setbacks and that sort of thing, and the way we build, thinking about passive cooling in houses, because heat, just the fact we're going to have many, many more warm nights, for example. I can't remember the specific statistics around that projection, but it is a real thing. I mean, the ambient temperature has increased, and it's going to continue to increase, and that's going to cause a variety of problems for us from a health perspective, our ability to recreate in, outdoors. All sorts of things will be impacted in ways that we maybe don't really fully appreciate yet. So it is very important to be thinking long term now, more than ever. I think.
Well, after the break, let's continue that, because I think this is what is important for us, and we can tell people about the public meetings and where and when and the like. Thanks very much for this opportunity. So for our listeners, please join us after the break.
From boat days to beach gatherings, leave the catering to Subway. Choose from small and large sandwich platters, double meat wrap platters, and top it off with optional cookie platters for dessert. Or ask about our Subway box to go with the option of 6-inch or foot-long sandwich, 1 cookie, and 1 bag of chips. For all occasions and celebrations, let Subway focus on the food so you can focus on the fun. Visit subway.ky for catering options. Subway. Eat fresh.
After more than 20 years, The Cayman Islands Air Show is back. Start your Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend on Friday, June 3rd by watching a thrilling air display on Public Beach, 7 Mile. Witness amazing acrobatic maneuvers as world-class pilots put on a stunning show. Then see the planes and meet the aviators at the Cayman Airways hangar. Parking permitted at designated sites with free shuttle buses to the events. For all the details and event lineup, visit CaymanAirShow.com. The Cayman Islands Air Show returns June 3rd.
The DG's 5K takes off this Sunday, May 29th, 6:30 a.m. at the Government Administration Building. But if you're not quite the morning person, you can still support the DG's 5K within your community and help to raise funds for the Cayman Islands Cancer Society, the Alzheimer's and Dementia Association of the Cayman Islands, and the MS Foundation. Purchase your DG's 5K 2022 shirt this Thursday or Friday, 26th and 27th of May at the Government Administration Building, and walk or run anytime this weekend. Don't forget to share your photos on social media using hashtag DG's5K Challenge.
The Health Services Authority's new pharmacy is now open at the Smith Road Medical Center. The new location features a large, comfortable waiting area and ticketing system to improve the patient experience. All uncollected prescriptions and refill requests previously submitted will now be available for collection at the Smith Road Pharmacy. Request your refills online at hsa.ky via WhatsApp 925-6532 or call 244-2715. For more information about our pharmacy hours, visit hsa.ky.
If you care about your car's performance and fuel economy, you must fill up at Jose's Escape with the new Pure 93. Experts know that the higher the octane rating, the better your engine will perform. Pure 93 is the highest octane fuel available in Cayman. Protect your car against pre-ignition and engine knocks. Top up your tank now with Pure 93 at Jose's Rubis and enter to win an awesome track bike. But there's more. Jose's offers 2 lateral flow test kits for only $10. The best KN95 masks, 2 for $5, and 10 stylish black surgical masks are only $5. Share the love. Purchase Reflections gift certificates and enter to win the amazing Trek bike.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for your time and your attention, and hopefully your continued interest and participation as we talk about climate change risk assessment. Chief Officer, first to you. May have teased people a bit about some upcoming public meetings. Some was probably known and anxiously awaiting the venue. But for those who are listening, when and where?
Yeah, so we'd like to invite the public to come out and join us tomorrow, Wednesday. That is tomorrow, yes?
Yeah.
Tomorrow evening from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Constitution Hall, which used to be known as Georgetown Town Hall. And we'll have a presentation by John and the team from the UK. The director, Gina, will be with us as well. And it'll just be an opportunity for us to give some information to the public regarding the process. I want to emphasize, actually, at this point that because we've had some people we have these technical workshops that we've mentioned this week, and there's some concern that this is the last opportunity, the last kick at the can to get involved and engaged with this. And I just want to reassure everybody that this is the initial start of what is going to be quite a long process to not only complete this climate change risk assessment, but then to feed that into the revision and the update of the climate change policy and all the work that will come out of that. And even within this risk assessment process, there will be more opportunities for the public to engage with us as we move through the process. The public meeting this week is really just an information sharing. We will be also launching a public survey, which will be looking to get a feel of people's knowledge, attitudes, and practices around climate change. So watch, our ministry has a LinkedIn page, Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency. We're also on the government website under gov.ky/sustainability, so you'll be able to find the links there once we put them up, probably tomorrow. But if you're not able to join us in person tomorrow night for the public meeting. I'm very pleased to advise that I've got your boss, Norma, who has agreed to broadcast it on Radio Cayman for us on Breeze FM, and it'll be recorded, and so we'll be able to rebroadcast at a later date. So if you're not able to join us in person at Constitution Hall tomorrow between 6 and 7:30, you can tune in to Breeze FM and catch the action there. So we are really looking forward to hearing from the public. John will be making a presentation that will have some interaction as well, using an app with your phone where you can vote and do word clouds and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So, yeah, so just to encourage people to come out. That's right. Science is fun.
One of my favorite classes after economics. But if I might ask, John, because I think we don't always appreciate the impact, and this is why I think, Ms. Gina, you've said to us, even if we were, and we shouldn't, but to ignore the per capita impact, just look at the individual, from that thing that you're doing, how is that affecting your neighbor, to global impact. But seabirds, and then if I may also reference seasonal ponds, we would think, well, Cayman is small, so what? You're not just looking at aquaculture and fisheries, but even the migratory birds, the seasonal ponds, they all play a role in the global landscape.
Yeah, and some of them are regionally important, some of them are globally important. In the Cayman Islands, you have quite a lot of endemic indigenous species that are found nowhere else on Earth. And so that all gets sort of mixed into the risk assessment, because if you're potentially putting a species at risk that doesn't exist, I mean, things like blue iguanas or the parrots and things, that's important. And globally that's important. But we do have to think, so we in our risk assessment we have broken it down, so we have got ponds as one of the risks, the effects of sort of salinization and things like that on that, and overtopping of waves, and so we've tried to be as exhaustive as we can be of thinking about pretty much every habitat on the islands and every type of species as well. We've got risks on frogs and reptiles and all sorts of things. So we're trying to cover everything. The only thing that we're not covering in this particular risk assessment is the finance sector, partly because we're environmental organisations that we don't think we have the expertise for that. But we are covering most other industries as well. So we're covering agriculture and fisheries and tourism and things like that. But we're being as broad as we can be in working systematically through these risks.
But there's also, as I listen, a socioeconomic impact as well that I think that we ignore because we don't try to quantify it in dollars and cents, and just the fact that maybe as a society we've seen a shift, we're concerned about future sort of progression. So this presentation tomorrow might be instructive for many of us to rethink in a certain way, Ms. Gina.
Yeah, we've broken the technical workshop. The focus on the first day is around biodiversity and habitats, and on the second day we're looking at economy and society. So, I mean, absolutely, it isn't, and that's one of the things, not just with climate change, but with sustainability. It's not just a green thing. It's not just an environment thing. It really is sort of all-encompassing. It impacts all of the ways that we live and work, and how we go about our daily life. And I think the more that we can get people to start talking about it and appreciate it and understand it from that broader perspective, the better we're all going to be. And I just wanted to add, I mentioned earlier that the public will have other opportunities to engage. I just want to also say that this climate change risk assessment, the final report from John and his team, will be made available to the public, and that'll be at the end of this process in probably September of this year. So people can rest assured that they will get to see. We're not going to take it away and hide it in the corner. We will share it with everybody when it's been finalized.
Well, I'm hoping that people will take ownership. As you said, that my friend reminds me, it's a we thing.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So when we come back from a news break, could we then ask about this long list? We reference it, and it's not like, I got a long list of things to do. Tell us more about this long list, and maybe even try to highlight some of the positives as possible. But the long list, I would like to learn a little bit more if I can. All right. Join us after the break. You're going to learn if you listen. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Maintaining the innovation.
On a daily basis, making it easy to connect with you, our listeners. Add us to WhatsApp today, 925-3261. That's 925-3261.
Radio Cayman.
Send a text or voice note.
Can I send a request, please?
You don't really have to ask us. Just send a request.
This is a shout out to my ex.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
From district to district, moving through the waters to Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Your station, your voice. All things Cayman, one radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman, your voice, your choice.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. The Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure informs that it is aware of the incident which occurred this morning at the Department of Vehicle and Driver's Licensing Breakers location, in which a customer was injured while in the process of getting a motor vehicle inspected. The customer has been taken for medical assistance, and the incident is under investigation. In international news, leaders of the world's largest Baptist denomination met on Tuesday to discuss and process an investigative report that uncovered decades of abuse and cover-ups. The Southern Baptist Convention, the U.S.-based Association for the Church, had covered up the abuse and vilified survivors, it said. With 13 million members, SBC is the largest Protestant body in the U.S. The investigation carried out by the SBC by an outside firm was launched in the wake of a 2019 report by the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News that exposed hundreds of alleged cases of sex abuse within the church. Amber Heard's team will not call Johnny Depp to the stand, a source close to Ms. Heard said, a strategic U-turn in the last days of the high-profile trial. Mr. Depp sued his ex-wife for $50 million for a column she wrote in which she claimed to be a victim of domestic abuse. Ms. Heard has countersued. British supermodel Kate Moss, a former girlfriend of Mr. Depp, is among witnesses expected to take the stand in the remaining days of the defamation trial. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, thank you for joining us, and again, a pleasant good afternoon. Very, very, if I might say once again, the Honorable Premier's ministry and his team, through his marketing, communications, and the press secretary. You guys do a lot of good things, share information, so helping us facilitate as we welcome our Chief Officer, Ms. Jennifer Horn, the Director of the Environment, and together with Dr. John Binniger from CFAS. You know, I was just asking prior to the break, share, because I think more of us need to appreciate that. I hope they don't forgive me for being a bit colloquial and getting into the vernacular, but it's a real thing. We're in this. It's not a green thing. It's not them. It's not us because we're a small place to ignore. This affects us all in many crucial ways. So if you can, we see some opportunities. Less mosquitoes. That's probably pretty good. But I will take the mosquitoes if I have an island still. This long list. What more can you share with us in sort of some of the insights into the long list, or to what extent?
Yeah, so I can tell you the sort of broad shape of it. Mm-hmm. As we said, that the first day will mostly be about species and habitats, and there are 22 risks that we've pulled out on species and habitats, and they range from things to do with, for example, shifts in the distribution of fish, whether that's fish that are of interest to the recreational fisheries, the small fisheries, or groupers and things like that, to effects on seabirds or turtles, or whales and dolphins, and then we've generally worked through each of the habitats, so woodland, wetlands, even down to the deep sea. Although we don't expect a lot of climate change impacts in the near term in the deep sea, And of course, there's a lot of information on coral reefs. And some of those habitats have more than one risk. For coral reefs, for example, we might focus on the effect of coral bleaching versus the sort of breakdown of reef structure. Because, as we've said, reef structure helps to protect the coast from waves and storms and things like that. And so we've pulled out a lot of risks. And then on the sort of more sort of social and economic, there's slightly more of those. There are risks that are to do with what we call provisioning services, so food. Mm-hmm. So that's fisheries, that's agriculture, a little bit about aquaculture, not so much. There's risks that focus on raw materials and energy. So that's building materials, water, oil and gas, those sorts of things. There's carrier services, so they're things like transport, shipping, but also the roads, settlements, the sewage system. And then there's cultural risks, which are risks to archaeological sites, but also to things that tourists value or that citizens value. And then finally there's regulatory and regulating services, which are things like a lot of the health risks come under this category. Things like beach erosion is another sort of regulatory thing, because that's again to do with coastal protection. And then we've got slightly more obscure things like if you have declines in the mangroves and the seagrasses, you reduce the carbon sort of sink, the amount of carbon that can be taken up by natural systems. And that's part of helping to adapt and mitigate climate change. So at the moment, there are quite large mangroves here, but as they're degraded, the ability to take up carbon is reduced. Mm-hmm. And so actually it makes the carbon emissions and the inventories much, much worse if your natural sinks are also damaged. Mm-hmm. And so that's the sort of broad shape of the risks that we've got. As I said, it's 53 in total, but it may well end up being more or less as we refine them over the next 2 days.
And maybe there'll be some overlap with some that could...
Yeah.
Yep. You referenced the Deep Sea Project earlier, and as you shared, we've seen an increase. Any insight into that, if you were able to share?
I think it's a UK Darwin project with Heriot Watt University.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a project that we're running with Heriot Watt through the Darwin initiative that we get as in a grant. And we're just basically trying to see, we're putting out baited underwater remote video cameras, primarily. We call them deep water bruvs that go down and we look for what's there, because we don't have a good understanding of the deep sea. And, we have very deep water very close to shore. But because of the use of our environment and where the pressures are, we've been concentrating on our shallow shelf, which is where our coral reefs are and our seagrasses and all of our coastal fisheries. So that's where most people are worried, But we need to start understanding a bit better, potentially, what are the risks and possibly some opportunities that we can look for in our deep water environment. So,
I mean, the Cayman Islands sort of marine territory is, I think, 40 times bigger than the land territory, so, or maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
And so we just don't know a lot about it.
Exactly.
And this is where, I liken it to sort of local knowledge when it comes to seafaring. A vessel comes into the harbour, and for it to be brought to shore safely, just go under the guidance of the local knowledge. This is very much the anecdotal comes into play. Like this report that hopefully September, will any of that imagery or any of the data from the Deepwater Project, would we be able to see that at any point?
Probably not in this report.
No, not in this, separate in this thing.
But we're going, absolutely, we're going to, we literally just started the project last month. So when we get some results that we can share, we usually try to share exciting news with people, or even the bad news.
Share it all.
Yes.
Because I think we need to appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just think, for instance, just out as a recreational, afternoon on a boat, and there's a pod of whales going by, or there may be an exaggerated story from some fisherman that says, I was out and I saw this thing and I'm quite sure what it was, but I've never seen it before. maybe not be so quick to dismiss the thing, even if it's exaggerated. And I think back, as you were sharing out to the subway back to the store, the guy was down there, he said, I don't know what it was, but it was something different. Who knows what it was, but if we don't know.
I mean, one of the things that we do at our laboratory is quite a lot of modelling of the distribution of species and trying to project that into the future. And we are going to, we're already seeing species change their distribution, particularly the more mobile animals. So things like tuna and swordfish and dolphin fish and things like that, which are really important to the sport fishery. They're very mobile, that as the environment and the currents and the temperature changes, they will change their distribution. And also you might get weather changes as well, affecting storminess. And so some of that you can model. It's quite complicated, but some of it you can't. We did a little bit of work trying to look at the distribution changes of fish in the Caribbean. And the area sort of around Cuba and around here are already some of the warmest waters in the Caribbean. And so there's not many animals that are going to move into warmer waters. They tend to move towards cooler waters. So it's probably more likely that you'll see species move out rather than move in. Because the waters around here are some of the warmest in the whole Caribbean region.
And this is, I think, understanding what is happening globally help us to be informed, regionally, and then act in a way that impacts us, from the shifting coastlines and the like. But this sort of isn't just about the environment from the perspective of the mangroves and the like, but even our building systems, from passive clothing to you shared, Ms. Gina, why we building where we are. Can I ask then, from that perspective, there's on Grand Cayman, we can drive around in our minds, and there are very few undeveloped parcels on the coastline, or even, everything's on the coastline in Cayman. What do we do about that? We have those properties already developed and some projected to be redeveloped.
Yeah, and I think that's where the opportunity is when these properties come forward for redevelopment. We need to future-proof whatever is going there. So we need to take climate change impacts into account. We need to take into account the fact that we are going to have more severe storms, hopefully not more frequently, but when we get them, they're going to be Category 3 and above is a projection, So, people are still arguing about whether Grace was a tropical storm or a hurricane. So I think, there's also something about the characteristics, perhaps, of the storms that I don't really understand quite yet. But, I think that we certainly need to just take the long-term view now. We don't have a lot of room here to make big mistakes. We don't have a massive landmass that when we can't sort of retreat to the hills. So we need to take care of what we have, and we really need to take this long-term view and be responsible with our planning and with our decision-making generally about infrastructure and everything, the way we develop, where we develop, how we build.
I think, too, it's important to recognize that people don't necessarily need to wait for government to mandate some of these things either. When if you're thinking of, building your home, or if you're a developer looking to redevelop one of these sites, you have that opportunity to take some of these things into consideration. And, just because, the planning code doesn't mandate that you must do X, Y, or Z, if there's something that will enhance the resiliency and future-proof your project, then by all means you should be considering doing that. And those opportunities are already out there. They already exist. And I think people, we're starting to see some examples of them in some of the developments coming online, but it's a change of mindset. And a change of approach that I think, the opportunity isn't just with government to dictate and mandate, but the opportunity is for the developers and for the public to sort of proactively and preemptively take some of these things into consideration and take them on board. And in the future, that will be the difference between the markability of your project and another project. If you can say, I've done these things around energy efficiency, I've done these things around climate resiliency. You can safely come and know that these things have been taken into account. It's a cheaper building for you to operate because we have things like shaded overhangs. We've made sure that we've, took things into account from the beginning. I think I've shared with you in the past when, we were building our family home, I guess 12 years ago now, one of the decisions we made was around a cistern. Did we want to put in a cistern or not? And at the time when we got the quote for the cistern, we were like, whew, that's way too much money, forget about it. But having paid water bills over the last 12 years, looking back now, I really wish I'd put the money into that cistern.
I'm glad you referenced that, because maybe this is where education and communication comes into play. But cisterns, quite strange enough, someone just this morning said to me that whether it was advised, but certainly being discouraged not to put in cisterns and similar things. Now, whether that's just misinformation, people misunderstanding, or whether it is an informal or sort of published practice. But for some reason, cisterns seem to be the thing that many people have shared with me, just me alone. Hey, I'm being told not to put it in by planning, by contractors, by everybody. I think it's a great thing, but then again, I don't have to clean
Absolutely.
it. So again, this communication and conversation can help us to make informed decisions.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, it's one of those difficult things to do, to sort of swallow the bitter pill, swallow the frog up front, but know that the payback period is going to come over time, it's a difficult decision to take, because especially if you're building a home, obviously that's one of the largest investments any of us is going to make, or buying a home even. But to be able to sort of make that investment up front. Whether it's to put in, more energy efficient windows, put in the insulation in your roof, put in a more efficient AC system. Those are going to be much higher upfront costs, but your monthly costs going forward are going to be reduced.
Right. Or build in a way that you can integrate these things, as you
over time.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful that you guys have taken such an extended time of your day to share with us. I hope that your continued meetings be successful, the public meetings and the workshops equally. And looking forward to come back and share as openly as you wish. And as a public, we'll be as engaged. So tomorrow evening?
Tomorrow evening, Constitution Hall from 6 to 7:30 p.m. and broadcasting live on Breeze FM.
That's right. Radio came on. That's part of why we are who we are. We're here to serve and to provide access. Ms. Gina, thank you again very much, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us, Sterling.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And Dr. John, thank you, sir.
Yeah,
enjoy your time.
Thanks.
It is. All right, well, let's go. I'm going to try very hard when we return, since it'll be a few minutes for the open line, to get Miss Susan to recite the poetry. We'll see. If not, I'll make up one. I'm sure I'll find something to say. If not, well, we'll find out. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean and comfortable environment, no long lines and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointment.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Ask our professional team about the benefits of cutting-edge technology with MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
Workforce Opportunities and Residency Cayman are reminding customers that applications must be completed in full or they will not be accepted. In efforts to improve customer service and processing time, only fully completed applications will be accepted. Customers are responsible for providing the required information for the application to be processed and are encouraged to review the application checklist before submission. For guidance, visit www.worc.ky.
Busy. Feel like there's not just enough hours in the day. Savannah Pharmacy, service to make your life easier. Now you can WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. And pickup is just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays. WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. Savannah Pharmacy, wholesome values with modern conveniences.
History has taught us that in crisis, humanity will always respond with innovation. What world-changing technologies will emerge from humanity's latest challenges? How can the Caribbean capitalize on the metaverse, blockchain, hybrid work, and more? Join us at the RF Economic Outlook Conference under the theme Future Forces, World-Changing Ideas, where we will explore the future of work, investments, technology, and more. The journey begins on June 8th. Reserve your seat today at www.rfeoc.com.
The annual business surveys are ongoing. The surveys are conducted by the Economics and Statistics Office and seek to measure the economic performance of all local industries. The survey forms for this year were mailed or emailed to all relevant entities operating in the Cayman Islands. The surveys are confidential under the Statistics Act and are exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. Your response matters. Do your part. Fill out and return your survey forms to the Economics and Statistics Office. For assistance in filling up the forms or for more information, visit www.eso.ky or call 244-4676 or 244-4607. Better data, better decisions, better business.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. And thanks again for joining us. And in the less than 10 minutes or so that remain on today's show, I want you to call and share a thought if you wish. A quick reminder that tomorrow evening, and what was known to us all for the longest time as the Georgetown Town Hall, and now has been renamed Constitution Hall, 6 p.m. until 7:30. There's a meeting to discuss the climate change risk assessment. And if you're unable, or if you find it more convenient, or if it's your preference, well, tune into Breeze FM and we'll carry it live as well. Please, continue to recognize and respect that our individual impact and contributions matter. And so we may think, well, it doesn't matter if I do this. Well, if it's a thoughtful, considerate approach to something, it does matter. And as Ms. Susan reminded me, the notion of how some of us very consciously ensure that the garbage that we have gets placed properly in the right place. But then we still complain and become sometimes incensed when we see so much of the litter along our roadsides, and even in some of the dikes and the places that we may go to retreat to, not just recharge but to decompress, as my friend says. In other places and spaces, we find as we exercise and get a little fresh air and get to engage with nature, it is unfortunate that there's so much litter, and perhaps unfortunately maybe even be some of us that are going in there to escape very inconsiderately, leaving some of our garbage behind. Well, whether it's the beach or the dikes, the roadsides, or just that undeveloped land, let's consider the impact and in relation to how we're littering the place and the space. Well, what is on your mind? Hey, 949-8037, 949-8037. Or toll free with the kind compliments of Flow at 1-800-534-8255, and send your thoughts to us as well. A lot happens in a small space, and 3 weeks or more, it will seem like the world can change. What a difference I'm reminded of 12 months. But it doesn't mean that you're not necessarily, missing all the promise that holds. It just sometimes means that you lack, what it takes to behold. And as we think of it, perhaps we think of it from the global perspective and ignore the micro for a second. What is it that is affecting you? And as you look at what is happening around the space and the place, how are you affecting it? So what's on your mind? 949-8037, 1-800-534-TALK, with the compliments of Flow if you want to share your thoughts with us. And as I look increasingly at what is before us, I'm reminded from our first guest over at the Department of Labor and Pensions that pension holiday ends at the end of June. We go to the phones. Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for calling.
Mr. Ebanks, how are you?
Very well. And yourself?
Oh, not too bad. Thankful. Another beautiful day.
It is indeed, It is indeed. Holds much promise.
Yeah, if we just keep the garbage under control, we'll be all right.
Well, that is, perhaps what we need to be constantly reminded that thing that which we do, how it affects others,
Mm-hmm. Sterling, I can remember coming up as a kid. We never had garbage problems, but I can recall off I don't remember seeing a soda can on the road or a bag of chips on the road or anything like category. Now you can find everything on the road.
Why is that?
On rocks on the road.
Yeah.
Pardon?
We have so much litter in public spaces, on the roads. We see it in the sidewalks, and it's not good enough for us to say, well, we have more people or point fingers. We can think to big cities where they have lots of people, but you don't see what seems like the constant littering that we see here, and it's getting to a place where I don't know what to say and how to say it that will get us as a people collectively to do something about it, so that it's not about
like someone Lord Graham said on OC that there is a norm for the individuals that no disrespect, I don't know to come into my country. But the fact of the matter is, not because you may left a half a dump home, you come here and bring the other half here to the island. You came here, you find it as paradise. Now we're going to Cayman Time, you found it clean. So why not have people clean? What is so hard to keep them clean? That's what I can't understand, because I watch the commercial there with advertising these homes on the island, like the real estate companies.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what the motto are at the end of the conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the good life in the Cayman Islands. That's what they mean. Welcome to the good life. Sure, you can have that kind of commercial saying welcome to the good life, but are you having an idea how our island was kept before anybody started coming here, for it to continue to be a garbage place and properly throughout the whole island, and taking people's property and throwing stuff on it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the bypass there, what we call the one into Newlands there.
Okay, that East-West Arterial or something?
Boulevard.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, still, if you see the garbage that accumulates there over the weekend, you wouldn't believe it. There's garbage bags, there are water bags that it took just 24 bottles of water out of it, and I guess put in your chest. The big Pepsi box with that whole 36 sodas in it, and just throw it up there, and they just go in. They did the dinner boxes, and I mean, where are the common sense to know that they're living here? I don't care what the nationality is. I don't know if right now, Sterling, our own got involved in it to a degree, stating in their head, in their mind, well, if they can come and do it, we can do it too. That's the mentality that we're going through here with this garbage and much more. You see the lady yesterday about courtesy of people blowing when you crossing them or blowing from one yard to the next. Let me tell you something. We need to get this nonsense under control and some serious fines.
Mm-hmm.
My car right now when she got like 3-4 rock hits in it from the weed whackers.
Yeah.
And so forth,
And that's it. I think we need to be able to establish the societal norms and communicate them clearly, so that all of the citizenry understand that it's not pointing fingers, it's about accepting ownership. So maybe, as you've reminded us so often, maybe we will start to appreciate that we're all in this together.
Yes. And Sterling, I want to say one more thing before we go. We doing garbage once a week, it is not sufficient. It needs to be stopped. And I know these MPs have to be driving through this island at some point in time and see the garbage and how it's being disposed out here for our people. to pick it up. That could be my husband out there. That could be a father out there picking up that garbage and bringing home all kind of germs to us, Sterling. It needs to be disposed better than what they're doing. We need to go around and find these places, homes, apartments, I wouldn't say condos much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't get me right up. I know the time is coming to go, but Sterling, something needs to be done, and it needs to be done fast.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are becoming a garbage dump throughout this whole island. And we do not try to work together. Oh, by the way, when Graham there was on OCN talking about their program that they're coming out with, I just wanted to say that I'm interested in getting involved in that as well, too, for my community. In my island, to help keep my island clean, because, I'm not going to let that cross my eye.
Right, that's the beautification project in the committee, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I need to get involved in that, so whoever they're listening,
Mm-hmm.
you can contact me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's always, wonderful to hear from you. Thanks for taking time to share with us, all right?
Yes, you have a great one.
You too, Ma. You too. You can see the passion in her eyes, and you can feel the smile on her face, and you can hear from her voice the love for the country. And maybe as individuals, perhaps we can recognize the collective impact of our actions and inactions. And as we move about our country, I'm very grateful to those of you who have come and worked and live amongst us, who remind us of the beauty, the safety, the sanity, the sanctity, the civility that we have in our society. But it is also sobering to see how many of our own are so willing to turn a blind eye. So instead of castigating, let's compliment. Instead of us chastising each other, let's see if we can find a way to unify our efforts. And if we like what we have here, let's see what we can do to make it the very best that we can for us to enjoy as we're here in age, and as those of us who come anew and grow and live among what is here. Too much required of us, but we have to appreciate that we have to take up the mantle. Well, you have a very safe, blessed, productive afternoon, and I trust and pray that tomorrow will be another blessed day that we'll be a part of. Until then, be blessed.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. MedLab in Smith Road Plaza, your complete medical laboratory solution. Call 949-7331. And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village, convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays.
Shaken yet standing firm. This is Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.